think we'll go ahead and get started. I think they'll, if we have some people coming in after, they'll get the gist. But
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming tonight. This is a really important conversation for everybody in our community, really. We do have a couple things. Help yourself to some mental health stickers back there. We have some drinks back there, so go ahead and help yourself. We also have a list back there. If you would like to be informed about upcoming events like this or similar to this, I'd love it if you guys put your email address and phone number down, and we'll contact you in the future when we have some things coming up. We are excited to welcome Jessica Kokesh tonight from the Lewis and Clark Behavioral Center. She has a lot of ABCs behind her name that I will let her tell you about. In honor of Mental Health Awareness Month and in honor of Suicide Prevention Week, we are really honored to have her bring us some really good information tonight. So let's give her a hand.
Thank you. Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I have been with Lewis and Clark as of mid-August. I'm starting my 9th year. I've always worked with adults. Crisis in adults is kind of my expertise area. So I actually got my undergrad in human services with a minor in criminology from what is now Mount Marty University. So it was Mount Marty College when I was going there. Graduated in 2012, so I'll give some numbers. And then I got a position with Lewis and Clark Behavioral. After I took a year and a half off from doing some mental health work, I got my career started at the Human Services Center as a counselor for about 3 years. So Lewis and Clark has taken me in so many different directions, which I'm very blessed and humbled for. Crisis work has been new to me for about the last 2.5 years specifically. My first 5 years with Lewis and Clark, I did case management work with adults. So crisis was just kind of all the time, just at different levels. Took about, I'd say 8 months break off of that, had our 3-year-old son, and then also took a position as an employment specialist, still at Lewis and Clark. So got to work with the same population with the adults. And then the position I'm in now as a crisis counselor, and also I help coordinate the adult mental health services. Those positions just kind of developed, and I said the right thing at the right time. And here we are, going on my 9th year and continuing doing what I love, which is mental health all around. Really like educating, something I do a lot in the crisis work that I do. So I'm really happy to give that back to you guys and the rest of the community whenever I can. So, put together a little presentation. We're going to kind of walk through some different things tonight. So kind of a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Tools such as coping skills, going to cover some warning signs. Warning signs primarily, yes, for suicide and behaviors and self-harm behaviors, those kinds of things, but also what mental health could look like in somebody who's maybe hasn't been treated for it before, or maybe you kind of see some of these things in others and you're like, should I pay attention to it, or maybe should I just wait and see what happens? Should I ignore it altogether? We'll talk about that type of viewpoint as well. And then also how to talk to someone about suicide. That's a big piece of education. And then also I want to clue in everyone on mental health resources nationally and then for sure locally. So put together a lot of stuff on that. Okay, so coping skills. These are pretty standard, right? Breathing techniques, using music, writing, exercise, self-soothing. So just to give you some background, like with crisis work, for example, we do a lot of safety planning. We do a lot of, what makes you feel better. There are times with self-soothing I have come across in my work in mental health, self-harming. Sometimes is identified as, well, Jessica, this makes me feel better. Okay, yes, it may make you feel better. And I always try and empathize with them and validate, like, I hear you. This is something that makes you feel better. You feel like you have control, but it's not healthy, right? It's something that may make us feel better, but we continue to damage ourselves. So Coping skills then, to kind of go into the self-soothing, I always like to talk about, sometimes people use rubber bands to our wrists. While you think, oh, you're still hurting yourself. Well, in a way, kind of, yes, I will be honest with that. But it is talked about as an alternative to self-harm. Just a simple sting, right? We're not leaving welts. We're not using, hair ties that are big, thick, and snap pretty hard. Rubber bands is a common method that I, myself and my colleagues and just everyone I kind of worked with throughout my years in mental health, that is where I'm kind of pulling some of these coping skills from. Exercise is a big one we talk about, whether that's going around the block. I've had clients that I've worked with in therapy before who have stationary bikes. It's kind of a big one. Chair exercises, things to take your mind off of what you're kind of already going through at the time. Writing, journaling is a big one. I know in the teen and youth kind of area, they kind of go more into the artistic side of drawing pictures. Working with colors and paints and charcoal, drawing out maybe what you're going through at that time. Some people I know have found relief of that. Or drawing a picture of maybe a place that makes you happy, your go-to place. So some ideas for the artistic writing and drawing side of things. Music, a lot of that could be, podcasts, DVDs, CDs, all those kinds of things for media can go beyond the music identifier, of course. And then breathing techniques, a very common one that I use in my practice is called box breathing. So a big piece of that is getting your mind off of whatever it is that you're going through. If we're experiencing some anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, maybe we're walking through the mall and we start to get really tense because there's a rush of people coming through. So what box breathing looks like, just to give you some examples, you're basically, and you could go kind of two different directions with this. So essentially, you're creating a box, okay? I've had people do this with their eyes closed. I've had them look at a blank wall and do it. Some people can do it just in the midair. I always have to have a focal point. So I'm either closing my eyes or using the wall. Nonetheless, basically what it is we're breathing in 4, and you can either hold 4 or you can breathe out 4 as you start to do the top of your box. And then you just kind of repeat that pattern as you're going through it. So ideally with a breathing exercise is to get your mind off of whatever it is that you're going on with, because your focus is to create that box and to think about your breathing. So ultimately, the idea behind coping skills is to get your mind off of whatever it is that is causing you the stress, feeling overwhelmed, even with sadness. That's an ideal coping skill to use for the breathing techniques. So again, these are just kind of very general starting points that I have used for coping skills. And you'll kind of see a difference, obviously, at our age, adults versus teens. Coping skills can kind of go in all different directions. If we're very active or if we're very stationary individuals, that's also a factor to put into play.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go for it.
Approximately, like how long would you say the box method is?
How
many square things?
I would say probably until you start to feel a calming effect come over you. A lot of times I've had individuals find it very beneficial when they can catch the difficulty catching their breath is starting to happen. Obviously, when we're kind of going into that anxiety and panic mode, we're already, we're not going to be able to do a box by that point. So that's when we activate all the other coping skills. So I would say until physically you start to feel kind of like your body kind of relax, just kind of like that relaxing feeling start to happen. I always say if one coping skill doesn't work, try another one, because it may be just the specific situation that we find ourselves in. Maybe deep breathing is not going to work, especially if we're already getting into that anxiety panic attack kind of stage. Then maybe we just need to go for a walk and go through that panic or anxiety attack. Maybe we need to write out what's going on and how we're feeling because then our focus is then being put on those words, or our focus is being put on the physical activity we're doing. Especially if you're outside, then you start to think, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling? That's actually another coping skill I wanted to talk about, which is called a grounding exercise. We're using all of our senses to kind of pick up those other things as well. So again, big goal with coping skills, I always like to educate, is to take our mind off of whatever we're going through in that moment. It doesn't have to be forever or for the next day. It's, right there in that moment, how to help us calm ourselves down so we can move on and try and problem solve or work through whatever it is that we're going through at that time. Okay, so this type of therapy, dialect behavior therapy, I just wanted to address some things that kind of tie into coping skills. I use this a lot with my clients. Again, as I said before, I do a lot of crisis work. So there are times I have clients come in and out for a session and then I may not see them again, or I'm helping, one of my co-counselors in between their original sessions. I'll see someone if they're really struggling. This works very good for the crisis work that I do at our local crisis center, which I'll address that location later. And this is very common for individuals who just really struggle to keep their emotions regulated. And by regulated, I mean to where we're not all over the place all the time. Or if we have a certain trigger that really upsets us, how we can get back to that regulation stage, or maybe the trigger doesn't accept it, or doesn't bother us as bad as maybe it did the last time. So a big piece of this that connects to coping skills is being mindful. So really focusing and learning to live in the present moment. So that may come like with the box breathing, for example. We recognize we're really starting to get worked up. We know our location where we're at, we're in a safe place. Okay, I think I can do box breathing and try and concentrate. We're being mindful of what is going on at the time, our location, how we're feeling, and the type of goal that we have, which is to ease our anxiety or that overwhelming feeling of what we're going through. Essentially, at that point, we're wanting to regulate our emotions by using the coping skills. Having the insight to activate one of your coping skills is really good, because then we're working on our distress tolerance, learning to diffuse stressful or even painful situations that would result in better health. Again, end game with coping skills is to have everything decrease, to get that relaxing feeling in our body even. And then of course, interpersonal effectiveness is to understand how to set boundaries and clearly express your needs. So this kind of situation may come into play. Let's say we are with a friend or family member, and I'll use the mall situation because I know a lot of people I work with, that tends to be a pretty big trigger going into the community in banks, grocery stores, malls, that kind of stuff. So let's say we're going through the mall and we start to have that feeling of maybe an anxiety attack happening, okay? Our body gets tense, we start to have just that kind of feeling like we're not gonna be able to catch our breath, maybe our heartbeat is pounding so quickly. So understanding how to set the boundaries and express your needs would be voicing to the person that you're with, hey, I'm not doing well right now. I do need you near me. However, I need to focus on what's about to happen. I want to avoid my anxiety attack, so I'm going to go use my coping skills. So essentially, clearly expressing your needs. You're being mindful about what's going on at the time. You know you need to regulate your emotions, so you're going to activate your deep breathing and you're making your needs known. So just a little insight into what DBT is, but I also wanted to point it out using one of our coping skills, that you can kind of use the skills of dialect behavioral therapy through the exercise, the music, and all of those that we just addressed too. Okay, so we're going to get into our warning signs. Now again, some of this I have pulled from a national website for substance abuse and mental health. A lot of these I have pulled just from my own experiences with clients or patients that I've worked with, and just through the education that I've had and colleague experiences. So that's kind of where a lot of this comes from. So we'll kind of look at suicidal ideation, self-harm thoughts or behavior, misuse of drugs or alcohol, imbalance in emotions, and then exposure to violence or traumatic life events as means of warning signs. Okay, so I've created just some examples here to kind of give you guys like a visual image of what some of these can look like. So the first section we're going to go over is suicide attempt, suicidal ideation, self-harm ideation, or self-harm behavior. So some sections I wanted to point out is that there are times that we will see suicide attempts or self-harming or the thoughts of either of those start to happen for different reasons. It's not going to always be, mental health focus. So some of the sections that I pointed out is medical health. So an example would be Susie called the crisis line and she's reporting that she has thoughts about ending her life. Her cancer has spread to another part of her body. She has a good support system from her family, coworkers, and even the neighbors on the block. She is the CEO of her law firm. All her debt has been paid off since working for the company, even after 1 year. She has been with the company for only 3 years. Susie just voices that she has had enough. She doesn't want to fight the cancer anymore. So again, this could be a medical health factor as to why somebody has these thoughts of suicide or self-harm. Another viewpoint could be situational. So in like my clinical terms, we would call that like an adjustment issue. We're really struggling to adjust whatever life event or factor or stressor in our life is going on. So in this case, we have Ryan, who got a B+ on his math test. He told me that he hurt himself with a pencil sharpener when he went into the bathroom during the lunch hour a little bit ago. Ryan is the best in his class though. His parents support him a lot and his older brother always makes sure he gets to school on time because his parents work early in the morning. Ryan is really funny and has a lot of friends at school. So this kind of example, as I said, we can see that Ryan's just kind of going through an adjustment. Obviously, we can see that a B+ was his trigger. So that can kind of show, if I was assessing Ryan here in person for safety and he reported to counselor, best friend, principal, whoever it may be, that he wanted to hurt himself, or that he did hurt himself with a pencil sharpener, things I would be talking to Ryan about is, is B+ abnormal for you? And those kinds of things. So that would kind of be the focus for our situational. Medication side effect. That's kind of a very common one that I see in my adult population sometimes, especially when we start new medications. So an example, Sheila tried to take her own life during her 15-minute break at work today. Sheila is a happy-go-lucky type of individual while at the office. Her husband always brings her to and from work. They laugh and joke. You can tell they have a deep love just by watching him pull away in the mornings or her laughing with him when they leave. Sheila is also on psychiatric medication and chooses to drink alcohol every morning before her husband gets up to ease her anxiety that she feels going on due to having a new position at work. She also doubles up on her psych medication for anxiety support. So oftentimes we always have the warnings of a side effect, right? Any medication we're on. Psych medications, sometimes if they interact with a medical medication or, everybody's different, the same medication isn't going to work for all of us. Sometimes we'll have a medication side effect that may bring on suicidal thinking or self-harm thinking, or sometimes as far as the action. So in this case, it's identified in Sheila's situation. Not only are we mixing substances or that we're drinking excessively, we're also mixing it with our psych medication, then we're doubling up on our psych medication. So that's kind of where we have the side effect that may be happening with Sheila as to why she wanted to act on the thoughts that she was having. Okay, so misuse of drugs or alcohol. I also created some situations with this. And the big thing I want to point out with the drugs and alcohol is, just because we may drink or use a substance, I want to point out it doesn't mean suicide, self-harm thoughts, ideation, not letting that happen by any means. The biggest thing I want to point out is, being aware of maybe an increase somebody has. Maybe the reason that they're having the increase. So a lot of background factors to this section. So did an example for an adult and an adolescent. Mark had demonstrated an increase in his alcohol intake over the last 3 months. So we have our time frame where we know the increase to happen. Instead of having a couple beers at the end of the night to wind down from a long work day, like he usually does, so then we have our baseline of where Mark used to be, he now drinks 12 to 24. Mark has a great job that he advanced in within a short period of time when he started, but he is struggling with meeting deadlines. So there's our first trigger and stressor. He also had to let go one of his employees who is one of his best friends, number 2. Mark also recently took a break in his relationship with his partner of 3 years to work on their own self-esteem issues before continuing as a couple. So there we have stressor number 3. So not only do we look at and observe and recognize his increase in that 3-month span, we also look at our stressors. And with Mark, he's got 3 and kind of pretty big ones. We have one in his social life, and we have one in his employment life. And then we maybe have one in a stage where maybe at one point he was very organized when he took on work before his other stressors started. And now we have 3 total. So our adolescent, Riley is 17 and struggling with making friends at her new school. She is smart for her age with numbers, which helps her in math class. However, the other kids call her a nerd or smarty pants when she walks by them in the hallway. Over the last couple months, there's our time frame again, Riley has started smoking marijuana in her room when her parents go to work to help her calm down so she can sleep at night. So here, before I keep going, we kind of have, when I talked about self-harm for some individuals being like that positive coping skill, we have Riley having, in her viewpoint, that positive coping skill of smoking the marijuana to help her calm down at night so she can sleep. She has increased her use in the last week because she has begun to have some self-harm thoughts happen. She hasn't opened to anyone about these new thoughts. Her parents work an overnight shift at the hospital. She feels she would be a burden if she were to talk to them before she left for school and before they would go to bed. So while she recognizes her increase or her self-harm thoughts, she has opted to use, in this case, we'll identify it as a negative coping skill of her substance use and increase it because she knows that that substance is going to calm her down and it's going to take away her self-harm thinking and her urges to hurt herself. Okay, so I pulled this from our national site of substance abuse and mental health. So these would be suicide warnings for youth and adults, and then generally you may notice a combination of these behaviors. So again, we don't want to think, withdrawing or feeling isolated, suicidal ideation. Certainly don't want to just pair one of these. The biggest thing with all of these factors is looking at where were we at, again, what we'd call baseline, or in that case, our normal, and then kind of recognizing if we've had a significant increase or a disruption in what normal would look like for an individual. So some things we have are talking about making plans for suicide, expressing hopelessness about the future, displaying severe or overwhelming emotional pain or distress, changing or withdrawing from social connections or situations, changes in sleep, anger, or hostility that seems out of character, out of context, recent increase in agitation or irritability. Some of these are the same between adults and adolescents. Alternatives would also be with the changes in sleep. Sometimes we want to look at sleeping too little or too much, so kind of a decreased need to sleep for functioning. Talking about being a burden to others, withdrawing or feeling isolated, talking about feeling trapped or in unbearable pain, showing rage or talking about seeking revenge. This can often be what I personally have experienced with an adolescent population, kind of like a I'm going to get back at you kind of viewpoint you may see coming with that rage. Increased use of alcohol or drugs, displaying extreme mood swings, talking about feeling helpless or having no reason to live. All right, so now we're gonna go into how to talk to someone that is suicidal or says they wanna hurt themselves. So how do I talk to someone if they tell me? So some examples I have pulled is, I have a plan to end my life. I want to cut, I want to burn myself, I am cutting myself, I am burning myself, I have thoughts of dying, or I want to die. So with this section, I'd like to say, obviously, you just kind of don't know what you're gonna get into when you start to have these conversations, right? They can just kind of go into any different direction. The biggest takeaway I hope you get from this section is just having the tools for that toolbox of that conversation. So, for a suicide talk or self-harm talk, questions to start with can include, again, you can use names for examples. Jimmy, what stressors right now do you have going on? Ryan, is there anything major that happened in life lately, but is not so much causing you stress? Sarah, how long have you felt this way? Susie, have you done this before? Oftentimes, if I have an individual say yes, I'll ask kind of like, how long has it been going since your last, in this case, self-harm act? Or if we are looking at maybe a suicide attempt or suicidal thinking, when's the last time you tried to end your life? Or when's the last time you had these thoughts? And then, Ariana, have you done this before? So maybe we get a no answer. And then it goes into the kind of question of, are you able to explain why you chose to self-harm instead of talking to someone? What drove you to attempt to hang yourself instead of trying to talk with someone? So the reason I start with very general questions like this is because first we kind of want to find out, okay, is this a new thing or is this something that's been going on for a while? And then we kind of want to see if it's new or if it's something that's been going on for a while, how long? So, we maybe want to talk about the longevity of it. And again, once you start to do these questions, your conversations can go into any way, especially with how comfortable said individual is talking with you, whether it's family member, friend, Monica walking on the street and you notice she's not doing good just by observation and you've never met Monica before. Very general questions that are not too invasive, and it's almost of a, hey, I'm checking up on you type of introduction. And then you can kind of feel that comfort level of where you're going with that conversation as well. Okay, so this big pyramid I got from my director of the crisis center, and I love this pyramid because it breaks down kind of the different levels of support of where we can maybe kind of analyze ourselves or others that we are trying to help with mental health. So at the very bottom, we have community mental health centers. So in town, this would be like Lewis and Clark Behavioral, Horizon, Psychological Associates, other medical group. A lot of those locations are mental health supports. So within these community health centers, this would probably be a resource for you or an individual that we're not quite maybe crisis level. We're like, I think I need to talk to someone. I think I have some things I need to figure out. Kind of at like that calm, cool, and collected kind of level. So then, of course, we have our crisis level. So this would be crisis lines, 911, 988, all of that good stuff that I'll share in a little bit for our local resources. And this would be our crisis center, the core center. We are a year young as of the 1st of September here in town. We are located on the stretch with the Very Sacred Heart Hospital. We have a Very Sacred Heart, the Pavilion Building, and then the Avera Benedictine Center. The core crisis center is right there on the main level. So that would be us right in here. So acute stabilization, again, I'll explain more about the core center here shortly. And then we get to our inpatient, kind of on the second line here. So it'd be other inpatient for if we have severe safety risks, if we need evaluations to occur with a qualified mental health professional. And then at the very top, we have, the psychiatric hospital. So the Human Services Center here in town, Avera Behavioral Health Services in Sioux Falls are two common locations. So again, we're kind of covering probably kind of this area and a little touch into here with everything I've been sharing today. So again, I'll cover these areas here in a little bit and give you guys some more information on what that can look like for our community. Oh, I went the wrong way. There we go. Okay. All right, so national and local resources. So a national one I want to identify is 988 call or text, a very common one that's on our news stations, commercials, TV, billboards in town, everything like that. So 988 is a call or text providing 24/7 free and confidential support to people in crisis or emotional distress. So an example I wanted to give is that individual was voicing he wanted to end his life to 988. He didn't do well with expressing his emotions face to face, so he opted to text because it was easier for him. He messages 988. He was able to voice he didn't have a plan. In any surrounding county right now that Lewis and Clark serves, which we cover 7 counties in the area, we have teamed up with 988 over the last year to send us a referral with a document with a name, county, and contact number, so Lewis and Clark Behavioral can provide outpatient follow-up to them. And this, we kind of connected with this resource here that I'll mention, and this one, we work hand in hand with Sioux Falls, so they have a lot of connection to those areas in regards to them being the ones to respond in the county. 988 connects you to a support in that area. So we also do follow-up if they mention anything about drug or alcohol in their 988 call. That's another thing that we give support to. Also want to point out law enforcement, emergency departments, and even a primary care doctor as a mental health resource. Sometimes if they need assistance on site for a mental health evaluation, some of our counties utilize a program called AVEL. AVEL is also out of Sioux Falls. This is a remote tool to get mental health assessed by a nursing team out of Sioux Falls. So again, Lewis and Clark works with AVEL for follow-ups or contacts in our catchment area. I have a lot of the 988 and the AVEL referrals come to myself and our director, and then we have 2 other individuals that do mobile crisis outreach. So for example, I have an individual quite frequently that will get some contacts out of Clay and Union County. So then when he gets that document, he will follow up to that individual, and then in turn, he will contact me because I do the intake coordination. If they want those services, then we'll set them up for counseling, meds, intensive case management if they need somebody to work with them in the community. We provide that support also. And with the AVEL, again, we have a nursing team. So that will be like law enforcement uses AVEL quite a bit. They use it here in our Yankton County Jail, and then our law enforcement out in Clay and Union is quite common. They kind of keep an iPad with them. And if they're meeting with an individual at the home or in the jail, they just go to their app, log into AVEL, and identify they have someone who is in need support of an evaluation. And then that nurse has that evaluation there at that time, and then their report just registers. And if identifies Clay, Union, Douglas, Hutchinson, Bond Home, any of those areas are our catchment area. So then it'll shoot to the designated crisis person, and we do follow up that way. All right, the core center. Again, that's the location I said earlier. That's over by the Sacred Heart Hospital. We've been open a year. We support voluntary and involuntary supports. We have our Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health Crisis Line that runs out of that location. We have 24/7 security, behavioral health techs, and nurses that are there. Crisis counselors, which I'm one of the original 3. We are there from 8:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. I work the 8:30 to 12 every day, Monday through Friday. And then my colleagues come in and they do a rotation. Usually it's 3 days on, 3 days off, but that's ideal plan, right? It's not always ideal. So there are times that they'll be on 5 days, 1 day, then 2 days, then 3 days. Nonetheless, we have the same 2 pair of guys, my colleagues at work. So they work the longer shift. They do the 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's the standard support that we were looking for at the core center. Ideally, we do a big support for those that are on a mental health hold by the county if they are deemed a danger to themselves or others. So that would be the involuntary aspect here. So we kind of provide, we're called an ARF, Area Regional Holding Facility. So instead of individuals being held in the emergency room or a jail cell, now it's the core center where they can come and be monitored while we kind of figure out the next best plan for them. And at the end of the month, I know Thrive is doing a big panel here at the library. And we have 2 representatives from Lewis and Clark, one from our drug and alcohol facility, and then my colleague and co-crisis counselor, Eric, will be here doing a little plug with drug and alcohol in the core center and outpatient. So I won't share too much on that right now. But nonetheless, 24/7 facility, that's the biggest thing.
How often
Yeah.
do you have multiple or more than one crisis going on at a time? And then, how does that stretch your staff
Yeah.
like that?
So it is very common to have, I think at most our qualified mental health professionals, which would be Eric and Gage, our regulars, to have 4 kind of going on all at one time. And that can be on the unit or off the unit. So up in our unit, we have 4 adult beds and we have a pediatric bed. There was at one time we turned an adult room into a pediatric room because we were going through a transfer of being discharged home to parents or going to an inpatient setting like HFC. So there are times kind of whatever's going on the unit is probably okay to not deal with right away because they are in a safe place. If we have something going on in a jail, there's that concept too. It happens more often than we thought was gonna happen, but at the same time, we still expected it because it's this new location, 24/7, it can happen at any time. More or less, we kind of decide what needs my attention first. Who is maybe more at risk first? Not so much who's more important first, but more so who's more at risk. There are times we have stuff going on in the lobby, and then the phone's ringing, and then Sacred Heart ED has somebody, and they want to keep them there because they're under medical evaluation. So, and then there are times where nothing really happens for a couple of days. We do support detox services at the core center. I do believe that has been a big need in our community and the surrounding areas. And we work very close with our drug and alcohol program, which is right above us, above the core center. So there are times that we are working with other team members of the drug and alcohol program to get drug and alcohol evaluations completed. We support individuals for detox, whether that's, alcohol, methamphetamines, cocaine, marijuana even. If we have somebody who comes in, whether it's crisis or detox and they have a medical health issue that develops, we're right through the tunnels to Avera Sacred Heart, big benefit being over there. We can work with their team very well using the emergency department. We do have an on-call certified nurse practitioner every week. They're a 24/7 rotation too. So we always have that medical support we can call on if we need to go that direction.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is there treatment that also, mental health counseling and treatment that happens at Core Center, or is it more just holding until the next place?
Yeah, so Core Center is primarily stabilization. So if they come in voluntary, we kind of average I would say a 2-day stay for a voluntary level, just to kind of take a break, regroup, let's stabilize, let's bring down, I wouldn't say bring down the depression, but, kind of stabilize them where they're at with that and anxiety. And if somebody is hearing voices, having delusions, seeing things that are not there, hearing things that are not there, it's a place where we can monitor very closely for that. So actually, if we need additional services, this is our connections here to outpatient. And a big benefit, and I'm pretty sure why they pulled me over to do half and half at the core center and outpatient is because I do the intake coordination for our adult programming. But I also work a lot, and probably more now that I've been doing my half and half at the core center with the youth and family services, getting individuals in for appointments. So let's say we have a crisis come in and we're like, okay, not quite inpatient level, but we need them to stay here for a little bit because they're having suicidal thinking, they self-harmed before they came in with their spouse, they're willing to stay with us. Amidst all of that stabilization, we have myself or one of our qualified mental health professionals kind of do a little bit of an interview and assessment. So all that stuff that we talked about before of how to talk to somebody, what do I say, what kind of questions do I ask? That's the stuff we're ultimately doing at the core center. And there are times when we're kind of in the mindset, no different than maybe you are in the community, if you have somebody that you have in mind where you've never talked about it before with them, but you know things are kind of happening. We, of course, get the viewpoint when somebody's coming in. What went on? When did it happen? Any other extra information? So we approach it the same way. You know, how long have you been doing this? How often has this been happening? You know, anything else going on right now that's brought you to this point? We kind of ask those same questions upon first interactions too. So from the core center, and even overall, even if it's not a core center visit, at our outpatient location, which is our 1028, we have counseling and meds for adults and adolescents. Youth and family does have family counseling opportunities for the youth and then their family members. We have 2 case management programs. Care case management is at this location, and then impact case management is in a location called Sir Charles Apartments. It's over by like 3rd, 4th Street by Lewis and Clark Ford dealership, kind of around that stretch of area. They're in the basement of that building. A lot of their clients live in that upper half. Impact case management is more intense services. There's a tighter qualification of entry into impact case management. Care case management is a less intense. So usually somebody going into impact services has probably not done well in care case management or meets the very specific criteria to go right into impact case management. Care case management covers all of our 7 counties that I talked about before. Impact case management, they have to be local, and that is because those case managers do daily contacts with all of their clients that they support. Another piece into youth and family is systems of care. Youth and family and systems of care is very, very involved with all of our school systems and all of our counties. Amazing work that group does. I've never worked with children except for crisis work. I do have a 3-year-old, but they're amazing at what they do. Very big team there. Systems of care, I like to describe it to my clients, the adults and families that I refer to it, is like a family case management. A lot of connections to family supports in the communities. United Way is a big connection for that. Clothing closets, summer activity passes for in the community, the activity center, the pool, all of that stuff work very close with systems of care. Evil Recovery Center is right above the core center. So this is the drug and alcohol program that I mentioned a little bit ago. They have outpatient services and they have an inpatient program. Individuals who get to go into the inpatient program, there's obviously a process for it to get accepted, right? But they have to be a South Dakota resident. So there are times that they support individuals from Rapid City, Sturgis. They don't have to be just in our county area. And then the core center, we reviewed, and 24/7 facility. Next summer, we will all be all together, all the way over by Walmart. If you guys are familiar with that area, there's a big building going up over there. That will be all of this in one location under one roof. I will like it because then I don't have to go from the Benedictine Center to 1028 every day. I'll get to be in one area and be able to work both programs at any time. So the core center does have a crisis line. It's a 1-800 number. if you were to call 4606, like after 5 o'clock, it's gonna roll over into our crisis line anyways. I tell that to everybody because memory numbers can be difficult. So I always say, if you can remember our main number, you're gonna be golden after hours, and then we'll roll over to there. And then we have a website. It's just our acronym, lcbhs.net. You can find everything possible on that location. Yes.
So how does it work? Because you said 988 will give a referral to Lewis and Clark. Is that like an immediate referral? Like, would people be better off calling 988 or calling Lewis and Clark Core Center?
I would say call here. If it's a general, like, I know I need help, I want to start some services type of, like, if that's where the mind is at that point for an individual, I would always recommend just calling Lewis and Clark Behavioral. The 988 referrals that we often get is because somebody is calling and in that moment, they are struggling with a suicidal thought, or they are struggling with wanting to self-harm. There are times that 988 is just what that individual knows, and they use it. That's from my experience working with 988 referrals. There are times that we've had individuals, let's say they're a student at Mount Marty or University of South Dakota, and they've called their home crisis line, for example, kind of like this 988 example, because that's the only crisis line they've known. Before core days, the calls would come to me, any crisis call or anything of that nature. So that individual's home crisis line actually found out we were a center location, community mental health, called us with the other individual on the line. They connected with me, stated the situation, and they're like, can I hang up now? Are you able to support this person? And I said, most definitely. They hang up, and now they're connected to us. And then I can tell them, we have a crisis line. We have this available for counseling, and educate all of that stuff. So I don't think there's really like a wrong or right way. Do I use 988? Do I try and search for a different number? There's also a resource I did not put on here, but it's 211. You can text or call that location, and it can give you not just mental health or substance use resources, but it can also tell you about housing, financial support, social services for getting food stamps, for getting shelters like Pathways Homeless Shelter here in town. They're connected to that as well. So, yeah, it just kind of depends on what resource you know at that time for when I do hear of individuals using it. But oftentimes on my end, I've seen the 988 referrals being, they're calling in crisis and need to talk to that person. So that 988 responder is doing the de-escalation. And then they ask, do you want to follow up? If so, then it gets connected to Lewis and Clark, and we run off of that.
Oh, so you don't necessarily get every single person who calls 988, you guys wouldn't know?
No, only if they're in our county. Yep. So if it's like Yankton, Clay, Bonholm, anything like that, we're going to get notified that a call was made. It may not be necessarily that, I should back up, because before I said they'll give it to us for a referral. It's usually they give it to us anyways to let us know, hey, this happened in this community. Here's what they kind of talked about. Maybe they want services or not. And the formatting has actually changed. We used to get like the whole dynamic from 988 of the conversation. Now it's just their name, their county, and their contact number. So we as the crisis center just said, we're following up. They're in our area. Maybe they don't know about us. Maybe they tried us 50 times and they didn't do well, but they need us now, so we're going to reach out. A VEL is different. We get to see the write-up that the nurses do, so we can see the substance of what happened and what maybe they're looking for, and we can fast track that type of service at our main office.
And my other question is, like, if an adolescent calls in 988, or your core center, do you know how that's handled? Like, when do they get parents involved?
We get parents involved right out of the gate the best we can. Another kind of situational thing that happens. So 988, I haven't experienced an adolescent situation with that because it just hasn't happened on my end personally. Our kind of like our go-to with whether it's the main office at Lewis and Clark or their crisis center, we're gonna help. If we can't get parent there or on the phone right away, we're assessing the situation right as it goes. Example for the core center, There are times we have had a 17-year-old walk to the Yankton Police Station and present with needing some help. At that point, the 17-year-old walked to the police station. Obviously, there's some insight there. So we connect with police station, they bring the individual up. In the meantime, we're gonna work with him, get parent information, try and do a contact. There are times we have youth and family involved, kind of in the beginning already, if it's somebody already in their services. And youth and family is very good about doing like the background collateral to mom, dad, or guardian while we're working on everything going on the unit, because we are able to do phone call verification to parents at the core center to say, hey, we have your kid here, A, B, and C is going on, can you give us consent to treat them? Can't say we've ever had a parent be like, no, you can't help my kid, type of thing. But that's why we have the option of in-person or verbal, because we do have paperwork to sign for the individuals when they come to the core center. And with the kids, we gotta have the guardian be the one to do the signing, just because that's confidentiality and HIPAA. And the biggest thing I want to share with the core center, whether it's detox or mental health support that an individual comes in with, you will not get billed for this service. You will not have to pay for this service. Yes, so that, amongst other great things about the core center, that is probably my top, to be quite honest. Even if you come in, I have people come in the mornings and like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I'll bring them into my office. We may not admit them on the unit. I may not feel there's any danger to themselves or others. They may just be like, this is what I needed to talk to somebody. They may not want to do outpatient counseling after that. That is fine. That's what we're there for, is for anybody who's in the moment and needs that help, they can come in and visit. Obviously, if somebody tries to come like every week or every few days and wants to talk about things, we're gonna be like, hey, I really think I could get you hooked up with a counselor, because it seems like we might have a big need for that. But we're not gonna be like, well, you've been here 3 times already, you're gonna have to go somewhere else. Obviously, that's not what we're gonna do, but we're gonna pick up on those cues that, okay, maybe there's more going on than what they came in with. And again, we may revisit those questions we talked about earlier, especially if we notice their demeanor has changed, their actions, or the things that they say, or the way they present themselves. Detox can be tough. That's a hit or miss. But that's why we have, we call it our multidisciplinary team, where we bring a whole bunch of other programs together and work together and be like, hey, is there anything more we can do with this individual? We're gonna keep admitting them. I'd rather have them detox in our core center than detox on the street, or try and detox at home and maybe they've never gone through it before, or they've been detoxing by themselves forever and all of a sudden they hear about the core center and then they come up and see us. We try and work with everybody and take each situation case by case. We won't turn away anybody unless, of course, there's an ongoing aggressive behavior that we're aware of. Or we cannot have anybody come up to the crisis center that is in custody with law enforcement, because then that law enforcement officer just has to stay there with them, and that's not reliable. So we do, when individuals need our help in our local jails, even if it's Charles Mix County, we do televideo for support if somebody needs help through that, whether it's a voluntary or involuntary situation. There are times I've done voluntary safety assessments when they're not on a mental health hold. They're not being, held for their mental health by any means in that incarceration. They're just there for a charge, where we've done over video and we've assessed, the thoughts. Again, back to our questions before. I only know that they're having suicidal thoughts. I don't know anything more than that. So I'm saying, Jimmy, how often has this been happening? Do you feel like this was brought on because now you have to be in jail for 40 days, or is this something that's been ongoing? Anything going on right now outside of obviously your legal situation, and now you're coming down off of methamphetamines? Do you have anything else going on with family? So there are times those assessments happen too. So we kind of get a little bit of everything at the core center, but again, I'm glad that we have a place where this can be offered. and people aren't going through things alone. That's my biggest plug for the Core Center I can say is, again, we're free. You're not going to get billed. Community Mental Health Center, where our community mental health identified for a reason as that identifier. We have states and fundings through the state of South Dakota that can help individuals who are low income, don't have insurance. We have certain financial categories to place those individuals when they start services. I always say, it's kind of contradictory when I say this though, but when I say don't let finances deter you from getting services, because we're all worried about finances, right? But in reality, Lewis and Clark will find a way to help those that are struggling with finances that feel like they need to stop services for that reason. We will just figure it out together because we have the resources to do that. Our billing department is phenomenal. Phenomenal people. I go to them quite a bit when I have intake calls coming in. So, a quote I wanted to share with you, it has been in my signature and my email ever since I started with Lewis and Clark Behavioral for the last ongoing 9 years. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. I really, really enjoy this quote because that is why I got into social work. That is why I went for my master's in social work 4 years ago. Because to know that I can help just one person, if I can help just one person a day with the work that I do, whether that's get them through that moment of panic, whether that's get them to come in to the crisis center, whether that's for them to show up to their appointment at outpatient for something I coordinated, that is enough for me at that time. The hardest part I can say is knowing that we can't help everybody, and that's probably the biggest struggle. But to know that I can get the education out there and make people maybe feel a little less intense about talking about mental health, that's ultimately my biggest goal about education. And I kind of educate like basically every day, whether it's a phone call or in person, again, given the type of work that I do between crisis and outpatient work and just helping colleagues in the office too. New colleagues are not too familiar with these kinds of resources I've shared with you today, so I enjoy that as well. Just informing and educating and saying it's okay to say the word suicide. It's okay to say I have depression, or I think I might have anxiety, but I'm not sure, or I have trouble focusing at school. I may have ADHD, I don't know. Lewis and Clark is the place to do it. And if it's not, I always say if it's not what somebody needs or likes, we have the connections to help individuals go elsewhere if that's what they desire. Just like earlier I said, we have a Bayer Medical Group, Horizons, Psych Associates, Heartland Counseling. We all know about each other. So I think that's the greatest thing that we have in common, and why I've been with Lewis and Clark for as long as I have. I don't think, given my positions that have developed now and the growth of the Core Center, I don't think I would want to be anywhere else for a very long time.
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah.
Quote, it's not just literally one person that you help because of the ripple effect. Maybe that particular day, that person chose not to self-harm or whatever, so then that, their family, their friends, their community. So I find that very interesting, and it's, to me, it's more than one person.
Definitely.
When it's the one person.
Yeah, it starts with one, right? Kind of like that first step. I do a lot of, obviously I've said I do a lot of crisis work, but given I kind of do the more voluntary work, because I'm not yet at that qualified mental health professional credential right now, I work with a lot of voluntary situations, and then my colleagues do the involuntary. With you saying it takes one, I see that happen a lot with USD and Mount Marty University. Whereas whether it's staff or other students are now calling and asking about things because of the experiences they've shared that other individuals do. And even in the communities, I mean, our jails as well, a lot of the officers reach out to us off and on, whether it's needing support assistance or even I've had some of like our local like investigators within the jail reach out and say, hey, I heard you guys have like community resource sheets. We have this type of situation going on with this type of population. You know, what do you have? Can you send me something? So again, the ripple effect, like you said, kind of falls into that piece of it too.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. It's always good to hear that. I mean, obviously, going into this field, we wouldn't be going into it for the paycheck. I mean, that's a stereotypical statement actually surrounding social work and mental health I've been a part of. Obviously, I don't go into it for that reason. I've always wanted to be in social work and drug and alcohol connection, probably since my freshman year of college. And I carried that all the way through. I actually started in drug and alcohol mindset, transitioned to youth and family, and then like mid-junior to senior year of college, then I'm like, social work, I'll go that direction. I can do more with my social work degree. That's also why I went that route. And I like kids, but had a touch of it when I was working at the Human Services Center, and I'm like, I might go the adult route, try that out, but I enjoy working with our kids in the crisis center. Just letting them know, like, this is a place where if you're really struggling at home, if you're struggling at school, school's a big one, especially now with school getting up and going, we're gonna see a lot more kids, adjustments and that kind of stuff. I do enjoy working with kids, but I prefer my caseload to be adults. That might be a great way to do it, but we have a great crew, my 2 counselors that work with me, a lot of background. One of them I worked with at outpatient. He's got a drug and alcohol background also. My other co-counselor, he's got a decade worth of like Sioux City, Iowa, very behavioral health type of background. So that comes in very handy, especially working with kids, because he worked in the admissions unit for like 6-7 years doing assessments with kids and adults and all populations. So he's really great in that realm too. Got a pretty big background on all of us, so that helps. Yeah, go ahead.
One other question. How do the counselors then unwind from what they hear in a day, a week, a month? And I'm sure you hear some pretty icky stories.
We do, yeah. So, but I'll start with before Core Center days. So we all kind of have like an open door policy with each other, whether that's in between sessions, beginning of the day. We have meetings every day, every morning. Outpatient does it. I know our case management programs do daily meetings. Crisis Center, we have a meeting every week to go over any crisis situations. We preach a lot of, if you're not doing well today, it's okay to not be here at work type of implementation. With the Core Center, that kind of opens up a whole new stressful aspect that can come on workers. We kind of started doing this year, we started doing kind of like a retreat gathering. We split up into, our team split up into like 2 sessions, and we kind of had just like a fun day type of gathering. So again, going back to really having the open door policy with each other. And we've all, so like I have 2 co-counselors at the main office that I work with. We all worked case management together. So we kind of know what that was like. And then when we have similar situations, when we're doing therapy with our clients, we can kind of go to each other with that. We have a lot of seasoned workers at our agency, whether that's with Lewis and Clark or they've just been a counselor, therapist, psychologist, social worker for years. So that's always good. I do think our daily meetings are really good to kind of give us a break a little bit and kind of talk about tough cases. And we're all pretty close with each other as far as knowing that we can go to each other with difficult stuff. And we have great supervisors too. I don't ever want to be a supervisor, to be quite honest. Would I like to be in charge of programs and those kinds of things? Yes. But I'm very, very content with where I'm at in my position right now, and I wouldn't want to change a thing.
It's a very wise statement.
Yeah. Well, I've done some thinking on it actually. So yes.
Does anybody else have any questions? Round of applause.
Thank you guys for
very
coming.
much, Jessica.
You're very welcome.
Just a couple things I wanted to mention. I'm sure Jessica would be okay if anybody wanted to come up and talk to you
Definitely.
afterwards. Okay.
Yep.
And just a couple things I want to mention on our calendar coming up this month that's very related. She did mention a panel coming up. We don't seem to have that on our calendar. We will fix that tomorrow. towards the end of the month, on the 24th, we talked about triggers and stressors, and one of the big one is grief, and we have been doing a end-of-life kind of planning over and over scenario. We've done stuff with
Funeral planning.
thank you, funeral planning. The one we have at the end of the month is planning with a purpose, end-of-life care. So that
Love
is
that.
a huge trigger, as we know, and a huge stressor. So that is going to be then. This weekend, as we have every month, we have a wonderful lady, Kelly Smith Keller, that comes in and she does therapeutic writing. And so that is this Saturday at 10 a.m. Anybody is welcome to come into that, and she walks you through some ways to do therapeutic writing on your own, journaling on your own. You do some fun things during the session, and then you can take that out with you. Next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. we also have a meditation group in here, so a lot of that breathing technique and how to get away from your stressor and back into your body and that calm coming over you. So
One
you guys
thing
will join us for some of those.
with that program idea, is there, like, say, a grief support group in town? Or, like, where would one go for that?
I know there's like versions of grief support, like I know, losing a loved one to suicide, I know there's a support group in town for that. I don't know how like active they are, as like advertising those kinds of things. I do know that I've seen that in the paper, on social media in the past. I don't know if they're still like active with it. And then there's, the church that is, like 1700, somewhere over there. They do the food bank, once, not the one down here by the library, but I wish I could remember, 1700 Burley.
Okay.
There's that church up there. I wish I could remember the name of it, dang it. But it's where, family education, Christian counseling used to be, that stretch of area. I know they have a lot of groups, like run by the pastor, volunteers from that community. So I actually did a shadowing in grad school for one of those, and it was a divorce, loss of a loved one support group. So I would say, if anything, like churches would be a good place to start and ask about those kinds of things. Because not everyone's on social media, so I don't want to talk about social media too
that's
much.
me on that.
Yeah. So that's why, yeah, I just don't know how much active is going on. The news, I've seen it in newspapers before, for sure. I know they've gotten it out there. I would say local churches, United Way may be a good contact to reach out to also.
And we have all of those contact information here too, if you ever want, if anybody ever wants any of that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you guys for coming
tonight.
It's great.